Alright, so today's video is going to be a follow-up video to a video I did not too long ago where the title is my six-figure leap strategy, where I share exactly how I trade leaps in my portfolio. So if you haven't watched that video yet, go ahead to watch that video first. I'll put the link at the top right-hand corner of this video. Now, ever since I created that video, I've had quite a number of people reach out to me to specifically ask about the rolling part, which I kind of briefly mentioned in that video. So since there were quite a number of people that have actually asked me about this rolling part, I've decided to create this video very specifically to entirely talk about rolling. So exactly what is rolling, why do you want to roll, when exactly do you roll, and how do you roll? We're going to talk all about it in this video. So very first thing we want to first talk about is what exactly is rolling? So if you're new to trading options and you're unfamiliar with this term of rolling, then it's actually pretty simple, right? The whole idea of rolling is pretty much just closing out the existing trade that is nearing expiration, and you subsequently open a new trade that is further out in time. That means you go for a further DTE. So when you do these two things simultaneously in a single order ticket, this whole act down here is called rolling. So as you can see, it's pretty simple, nothing complex about this, and you can very easily do this in your broker platform. Most broker platforms should give you a way to roll your trades where you close out your existing trade and open up a new trade, all in a single order ticket. So the very next important question that you need to ask yourself is, what exactly is the purpose of rolling? Because a lot of times people tend to roll for the wrong reasons. Not all the time you actually want to roll. So what exactly is the purpose of rolling? So in general, there are two purposes. The very first one is to continue the trade, potentially increasing profits. So this scenario basically just means that your position, current leaps position, is in a profit, and you still have a bullish view, thinking that the market is still going to go up. And this is where you want to continue the trade because it's already getting close to expiration. If you do not do anything, then the trade will pretty much expire and the trade cannot continue. So at this point of time, you will have to roll in order to continue the trade. And if the market continues to go up, or the underlying or the stock that you trade continues to go up, you're going to be in more profits again. And by the way, when I say you make profits when the market is going up, it's because I'm very specifically talking about the call leaps down here and not the put leaps. So if you're going to buy put leaps, then it's going to be opposite. The market has to go down in order for your position to be in profit. Now, next, the second purpose is to prolong the trade for potential recovery. So in this scenario, your current trade is actually in a loss or in a drawdown. So this is where you probably still have a long-term view where the market or the underlying, the stock that you're trading is still going to go up, and it's currently still down at the moment, so you're taking a loss. So in order for you to reach the point where your trade is going to be in a profit, this is where you can roll it to prolong the trade for the eventual recovery. And this is where, in the end, it can become a net profit. So these are the two purposes of rolling. And as you can see, the general idea here is to just extend the life of the trade. So whether be it to increase the profits if it's already in profit, or to eventually recover where you turn your current trade, which is currently in a drawdown, to eventually into a profit. So these are the two purposes of rolling. But the more important question you should be asking yourself is, should you actually roll? Because believe it or not, a lot of people, when they get into rolling, the idea of them rolling actually is not necessarily right. So they are rolling for the wrong reasons most of the time. So the question is, should you actually roll or not? And the answer is yes, if and only if, very important, only if you still have a bullish view. That means you still think that the underlying, the stock, is going to keep going up. Because if you don't think it's going to keep going up, then there's no point to roll it at all. At that point of time, if you think that the market is not going to go up, then you should actually not roll this. Which leads me to the second part. So you shouldn't roll. The answer is no, you shouldn't roll if you're simply hoping that the underlying will go up. And this is very important because a lot of people think that rolling is going to somehow magically turn you into a profit. And that's not true, because rolling can actually be a double-edged sword. Because if the market goes up, yes, you're going to be in profit. But if the market goes down, then you're going to be in a bigger loss than if you hadn't rolled in the first place. So that is why it's very important to first identify the reason for rolling. And the only time you should be rolling is if you still have a bullish view. So what to do if you're unsure? if you do not even have any view whatsoever. Or worse, you think that the market is not likely to go up. Then in this case, we need to use the wise words of somebody by the name of Russell Peters. Be a man, do the right thing. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you know who is Russell Peters, then just do a Google search, find this man, and you understand what I mean. So what exactly is doing the right thing in this context? Well, doing the right thing over here simply just means to close the trade and take the loss like a man or a woman, right? Of course, if you're a woman doing the trade. So if you're unsure if the market is going to go up or the stock underlying is going to go up, and the only purpose that you are planning to roll is because you do not actually want to take the loss, but you actually are, because when you're closing the trade and opening a new one, you actually have to close out for a loss first before opening a new trade. So that is why it's very important to identify whether you are still bullish on the underlying. If you are, then yes, the rolling makes sense because it's going to play out to your view if the market or the stock, the underlying, eventually goes up. But if you're unsure, or even worse, you don't even think that it's going to go up, then you shouldn't be rolling in the first place. So here are some very, very important points that you really need to take note of if you're thinking of rolling or even putting on the LEAPS strategy in the first place. So first of all, you need to understand and realize that rolling is not a repair for a losing trade. Many times you might hear people say, hey, this is a repair trade by rolling. That is only kind of true if the underlying that you've chosen goes up. Then in this case, it's kind of like a repair, although it's not, right? People like to use this term repair just to make it sound attractive. But in actual essence of this rolling trade, it's not really a repair at all. Because while rolling can potentially increase your profits or potentially turn your trade into a profit if the market continues to go up, it can also, very important, I'm going to put a star down here, it can also easily turn a profitable trade into a loss, or worse, increase your losses. Because let's say, for example, your trade is already in a profit. And at the point of time, if you're unsure if the market is going to continue going up and you're just putting it on hoping and praying that it continues to go up because maybe for greed, you want more profits, then guess what? If the market is suddenly going to do a U-turn and then just go all the way down, then all of a sudden the profitable trade which you had previously could eventually turn into a net loss from this roll which you did. Or worse, increase your losses. That means if you initially already had a losing position and then you roll it, it could further deepen your losses if the market continues to go down again. So remember, rolling is not a repair for a losing trade, and you only want to put it on if you have a bullish view still. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, the next thing is, when should you consider rolling? And the answer is when it's getting close to expiration, where the theta decay, a very important concept, starts to increase exponentially. So most of the videos that I've created on this channel basically is around selling options. So when we are selling options, theta decay is actually on our side. Because when we are selling the premium, we hopefully want to buy it at a lower price than when we first sold it, or have it all expire worthless. This is how we make profits when we are selling options. But when we are buying options, then theta decay is going to be our enemy. It's going to be our nemesis. It's going to be our kryptonite, whereby when the theta decay starts to get higher, what actually happens is that our value can start to deteriorate over time, because as it gets closer to expiration, all the extrinsic value that we have in the option actually goes down to zero. And when it goes down to zero, this is where our option value can actually be lower than what it actually can be. So exactly when should we consider rolling? So this is where we want to take a look at the theta decay curve, because there's going to be a part on the curve where it starts to increase exponentially. So let's take a look at the curve over here. And over here, you can see this is the theta decay curve, and you can easily just go to Investopedia or just do a Google search, and you see many of this kind of graph down here. So you can see over here, this is actually an exponential decay, the increase. It's rapidly increasing in the decay as it gets closer and closer to expiration. So you can see over here, 9 months, the plane over here is not that steep, right? From here to here, maybe it's something like this. But as it gets closer and closer to expiration, you notice the steepness actually increases by quite a bit. So that is why we want to roll it before this increase in the theta decay really kicks in, where it becomes really exponential. So where exactly in time is this? This is usually around the last, I would say 60 to 90 days. So around 60 to 90 days, I would say maybe somewhere around here. And as you can see, if we get to even closer to the expiration, maybe the last 30 to 45 days, it gets even more steeper in terms of the theta decay. That's where you're going to rapidly lose value in the extrinsic value of your options. So ideally, this is kind of the place where I want to start to roll, because at least this is where when I roll, I kind of renew the curve, the reset of the time decay, where the decay is no longer going to be that quick anymore. Then it goes back to kind of slowing down again, and then eventually when it comes back down to this point again, then I'm going to roll again. So where is this point exactly? So I would say this is somewhere around the 60 to 90 days mark. So around 60 to 90 DTE, this is where you might want to consider doing the roll. Now, if you don't want to roll so early, you can also choose to wait until it's closer, maybe around the 45 to around 60 DTE mark. So anywhere around here is fine. You just need to know is that as it gets closer and closer to zero, this DTE, this is where your theta decay starts to pick up and your option value in your LEAPS starts to rapidly decay from the extrinsic value point of view. Okay, now that we know when we should start consider rolling, let's get into the actual rolling strategies, because there are two different ways that you can actually roll it. So the very first way is to roll to the initial delta. And the second way is to roll to reuse the remaining capital. So two different ways to roll it, and this really depends on your objective. So the very first one that I'll get into is rolling to the initial delta. So what it just means is that you're going to roll to the initial delta that you first started off with. So let's say when you first put on the LEAP strategy, let's say you started off with 90 delta. And let's say by this time, maybe it could have gone up to, let's say, around 97 delta, or it may have gone down to, let's say, around, say, 70 delta. Around there. Okay, so basically either a higher delta or a lower delta. So by rolling to the initial delta, what it simply just means is that from this trade, you just roll to the new trade back to 90 delta. So there's going to be two slightly different end results, so to speak, depending on whether the current trade which you have, which you're rolling, is in a profit or in a loss at the moment. So if the current position is in a profit, then by rolling to the initial delta, in 90 delta in this example, then it will result in a net credit. So let me show you exactly what I mean over here. So if I was to go to some of my positions over here, you can see that I do have some trades over here, the LEAPS, which I had actually rolled. So you can see over here, this trades down here still have quite a bit of time to it. It's 541 days left. That means to say it's more than a year. So we're not even close to the point where we are going to consider rolling. So I can't exactly use this as an example, but I'm just going to give you an idea as to how it can be done. So as you can see over here, I do have some positions that I've already rolled, because previously it was already deep in profits. It was already in profits, and at the point of time, it's getting close to expiration. So I wanted to roll to continue the trade to potentially increase the profit. So if you remember, let me just go back to the slides down here. The purpose of rolling, there are two. So because my initial trade was in a profit, when I roll it again, the idea here is to continue the trade, potentially increasing the profits, because the underlying is actually an index ETF, which is QQQ, and I do have a bullish view. I choose to roll it. So let me show you another underlying which I have the trade on, the LEAPS on, which is on Meta. By the way, if you like this video so far, please subscribe and also click the thumbs up button, and also do get your free copy of the Options Income Blueprint, where I share the top 3 option strategies that help you generate a consistent income each month, trading just 1 to 2 hours a day, right? So if you want to go ahead to get this copy, just head on over to optionswithdavis.com/blueprint. All right, back to the video. And this is a roll trade. Again, previously it was deep in profits already, so I decided to roll to continue the trade. So how exactly should you be rolling to the initial delta? So for this, I'm just going to use the example down here. Now let's just imagine this is going to be like around 60 to 90 DTE. So this is definitely still far out, right? We're not going to roll this anytime soon. But for the purpose of this example, just to show you what I mean by rolling, if it's currently in a profit, you will get a net credit. So let's just imagine that maybe this is like 60 DTE left, okay? So let me just go and find my position first. So this position right now, because it's in the profit, you will find that it's going to be pretty deep in the money right now. So there you go. This is where my position is when I first put it on, it's somewhere around close to 90 deltas. And as you can see over here, the delta has already increased because the market has gone up, or rather Meta has gone up ever since I wrote the trade. So now it's in a profit. So when the underlying actually goes up, when you put on the position, it now becomes deeper in the money because right now it's further from where the current market price is. So this is where the current market price is, somewhere around here. You can see the line down here denoting where the options is in the money, which is the grid part down here, and out of the money, which is the non-grid part down here. So if it goes deep in the profit, this is where you're going to see the delta starts to increase. And the opposite is true as well. So for example, if you are in a loss right now when you first put it on, then chances are that your position is going to be somewhere lower than 90 delta, maybe somewhere around here. So as you can see over here, let's first take a look at what is the cost for putting on this trade in the first place. How much did I pay? So you can see over here, the trade price is 455 and currently it's marking for 589. So if I roll this to the initial delta, which is around 90, I'm going to receive a net credit. So let me just show you exactly this whole rolling down here. So to roll it, you're simply, remember, it's a two-step process. You're just closing out the existing position. So since I already have a long position down here, closing it out, I just click the bid. And then now I'm going to go to a further DTE. So in this case, let's just use the furthest one that is available. And that is 905 days. So I'm going to go to the 90 delta to put on the trade as the second part of rolling. So the second part of rolling is simply just to reestablish the trade, but at the 90 delta. So once I put this on, you can see this is actually lesser for me to put on than what I sold the initial trade for. Because right now, the value of the trade, as I've shown you just now, let's just take a look again, is currently marking at 589. So if I was to close out at 589, and then I put on the new trade at around 438, there's going to be a spillover of a profit. It's going to be a net credit. As you can see over here, it becomes minus 156. So that is going to be a net credit of around $15,000. So let me just show it to you. If I click review over here, you can see over here, it says a credit of around $16,000, right? $15,690 to be exact. So this is what I mean, that you're going to have a net credit when you roll it if you are in a profit, which is, let me just scroll it down here. There we go. So you can see over here, if the current position is in a profit, which the example I showed you just now is in, it will result in a net credit. But if the current position is in a loss, it will result in a net debit. And a net debit just means that you do have to top up from the initial amount which you had put on the trade. So let's say for the trade which I had put on down here, let's say it was a 455, right? If I'm not mistaken. Let's just go and double check again. So I'll just remove this position. Let me remove all these drawings as well. So let's take a look again. So the initial cost was 455.88. Okay, so let us simulate that right now it's in a current loss. So let's say that the market has dropped since then. And if the market drops, you will see that the strike price that you have chosen is now closer to where the current market price is, right? Closer to an at the money option. So 510, let's use this as the example, around 80 deltas. So the price have actually dropped as well, the value of this option, because I purchased the initial option for around $455. What is it worth now? It's worth around $295 to $298, around $300. So we have actually lost money on this trade. So how do I roll this? So to roll it, you have to go to the initial position. Okay, so first off, as you can see over here, I looked at the wrong DTE. So it's very important to make sure that you have it on the right DTE, okay? So I'm just going to close out this first. Let me just go over the 541. And let's just take a look at the let's just use 500 strike price as where the strike price was when you first put it on. Okay, so we bought it for around $455. So now it's currently marking at around 269. So we do have a current loss on this position. So to roll it again, simply just close it out. So it is a long position initially. So just imagine this already is a long position at 500 strike price. I'm just going to sell it to close out the position. And then same thing, I'm going to go out to the further DTE. And now I'm going to go to the 90 delta. So if I go to the 90 delta, you can see over here, the ask is around 438. Right? If you go for the mid price, it's going to be somewhere around 433 thereabouts. So if I click this, straight away you can see that it's going to be a debit. Why is that so? Because we closed that initial position, which is going to be around $200 plus, and then we are going to buy a much more expensive option down here because we want to go back to the 90 delta. So over here, you can see now we are in a debit of around 162, which is going to be about $16,000 plus. So if I click the review over here, you can see that it says down here it's net debit. That means now you have to top up if you wish to roll it to this same initial delta which you had initially first put on the first trade. So this is why I say that if the current position is in a loss, it will result in a net debit. Now, the second way to roll is to reuse the capital, the remaining capital. That means to say the whole idea down here is that you actually do not want to top up. If you do not want to top up, then this is where you roll to reuse the capital. So the whole idea here is to just use the value of the current existing option to roll to the new position. And this is where the delta actually can change. So depending on whether the position is currently in a profit or loss, the delta will be greatly different from each other. So you can see over here, if the current position is in a profit, then there are two things you can do. You can either roll to a higher delta with one contract or roll to a lower delta with two contracts. So what you're doing down here is really just kind of like compounding the amount which you have gotten from the existing position, and then you compound it to two contracts. So what this does is that if the market actually continues to go up, you're going to make even more. But of course, if the market comes down, then it could actually turn your initial profit to a net loss in the end, because now you have two contracts. So let me just show you how it's done. So let's go back to our initial position down here. So let's say our initial position now is in a profit, and you can see that I have about $587 or $589 around the mid price down here. This pretty much is the value of my current option. And to reuse this capital basically just means that I'm going to find the option in the further DTE that fills this amount exactly. So let's just go over to the further DTE to take a look at what are our options. So the very first option, right, very simple, very straightforward. All I got to do is find the option strike price that is roughly around this price down here, 589.9. So if I was to take a look at the option chain down here based on the ask price, we are pretty much just, I think, this option down here. So the mid price is going to be around 585. If I go for this one, this is going to be slightly lesser and this is going to be slightly more. So if I choose this down here, I'm most likely going to get some credit, although I try as much as possible to reuse the whole amount. So you can see over here, I get a net credit of around 492, which is about $492. And what you notice down here is that my delta has now gone up to 97 deltas. So our initial delta was around 90 deltas, but because I want to reuse the capital, I have to go to a much deeper in the money option. So you might be wondering, Davis, why do you want to exactly do that? And the reason why I might consider doing this is mainly because of the extrinsic value. So like I mentioned before, extrinsic value is going to be our nemesis when we are buying options. So as much as possible, we do not want to buy the option where there's too high of an extrinsic value, because the higher the extrinsic value, the higher the theta decay is going to be as well. So if I was to go to the extreme end, where it's pretty much at the money, you can see down here, the extrinsic value is about $183. Pretty much is $18,300 worth of extrinsic value. Which means to say, if the market doesn't even move at the end of this expiration of this option, I am going to lose everything down here. But if I choose the one that is very deep in the money, using this example over here, you can see the extrinsic value is only $12.80. So this is so much smaller compared to what we've seen just now. So what this means is that if Meta just doesn't move at the expiration of this option, all I'm going to lose is just $12.80, which equates to about $1,200. Compared to the amount down here, which is about $18,000, this is going to be much, much smaller. So that is why this is one of the considerations I have when I want to roll as well. Now, the next consideration is that you want to kind of compound your profits. And this is where you take the amount which you have received from selling the initial option, so which is the one down here, then you split it into two options instead. So how do you split it into two options? Well, you just have to find the amount, which is roughly around 590 divided by 2. So 590 divided by 2 is going to be around 2 5.95, I believe. So instead of just buying one option at 5.90, I am going to go and find the strike price that actually is worth around $295, and I have two contracts for that. So as you can see over here, I kind of have two different candidates. So either I can go for two contracts of 510 or 520. With 510, chances are that I might have to top up a little bit, because if I was to click this and I was to go two contracts, then it's going to be slightly more expensive. So let me just increase this to two contracts. And you can see over here, I have to top up roughly about $3.73, which is about $373. Or if I go to the 520, so let me just adjust it over here. If I go to 520, then I'm going to get a net credit. So my net credit is about 927. So in exchange for having these two contracts to kind of compound my profits, I'm going for a lower delta. So with a lower delta, what you notice is that your extrinsic value is going to be much higher. So this is $98 in terms of extrinsic value. And because you have two contracts, your extrinsic value is kind of much more right now. So that means that if Meta actually does not move at expiration, that means the price is still the same when this option expires, then you're pretty much going to lose 98.83 times 2, because you have two contracts. Whereas compared to if I had it over here, at around, I can't remember what it was. I think it was somewhere around here. I think this strike down here, 130, where the cost is close to around 600. You can see my extrinsic value, all I'm going to lose is only $12.50. So this is something that you really need to think about. Are you much more concerned that the underlying is not going to move or maybe even go down? Then in that case, maybe you might want to consider going for this method instead, where you're going for much deeper in the money, but only one contract. But if you're much more in terms of, I want to get much more profits, I want to compound my money, and you're not too concerned about the downside, which can actually happen, then you can choose to go for this. Now, if the current position is in a loss, then you pretty much have to roll to a lower delta than your initial delta. So it's pretty much like this down here. You're rolling to a lower delta, but this time you only can have one contract. So let us take a look over here again. And using the example, I think it was 500 strike price. So let's just use 500 strike price. Let's just say that right now, your option value has dropped to around $270 thereabouts. So in order for you to roll it and you do not want to top up, you have to find the option strike price that is around this price. Because what you're doing is simply just closing out this trade. So you're selling it off, and then you're putting on a new trade at a further DTE that is around the same value as the option which you're planning to close. So in this case, I need to find the option strike price that is only going to cost me roughly around $270, as you can see over here. So the only choice which I pretty much have would be this one down here. If I go to 273, this one, this is where I'm going to top up a little bit. So if you don't mind topping up a little bit, you can go for this. But if you do not want to at all, then this would be the choice down here, which is 560. So in this case, you actually can still have some credit to your account, because the option which you're purchasing is actually lesser than the trade which you closed out. So you will notice that the delta for this is going to be so much lower than the initial delta that you put on. So we use the example of 90 delta. So in this case, you can see that from 90 delta, it has dropped to 77 delta. It's quite a big jump. And you can see over here, your extrinsic value is going to be so much higher as well. So if you do not want to top up for the trade, you want to keep this capital consistent, especially if you've only set aside a certain amount just for the trade, then this is the only choice that you pretty much have. So if you choose this route down here, you got to be very certain that your view is still going to be bullish, or at least the underlying have a chance to go back up. Because if it doesn't, then at the end, where it's close to expiration again, around the 60 to 90 days window, this is where you need to make another decision. Because if it's going to still be in a loss, then guess what? This is going to be at a lower value again. Maybe this time the amount could be around $100 something, and then you have to do the roll again. So you need to find a further DTE where the option is going to be around this new value of the option again. So that means chances is going to be even lower delta, to the point that it could even get very close to around at the money. And that's when it's going to be pretty dangerous for the LEAPS strategy because now you're going to have a pretty high amount of extrinsic value. And again, extrinsic value will always decay as you get closer and closer to expiration. So that is why the initial LEAPS strategy, when you put it on, we want to try and get not too high of an extrinsic value as possible. So this is how you roll your LEAPS position, and hopefully this video has been helpful for you. And if it has, I would greatly appreciate if you give me a thumbs up on this video and also subscribe to my channel for more options trading video like this, and I will see you in the next video.